the cap situation. None of us are capologists, but looks pretty tricky right now, especially for Mitch Marner wanting 11 million bucks. And say he even gets north of 10. That's all the cap space. Like north of 10, once they put Nathan Horton on LTIR, that's it. Say 2. Like you don't really have any other wiggle room. So I guess the question to you is how do you see them navigating this now moving forward? Because it's starting to get really tricky without, for me anyways, thinking about them moving off of a guy like Jake Muzzin or even Nazem Kadri, even though his contract is probably helping you a lot more than it's hurting you.
Yeah, his contract is probably helping you, and Muzzin's at $4 million is probably doing the same thing. So, I think you end up getting to a phase where moving off Marleau puts you in a situation where you can maybe nickel and dime your way there. You can maybe say, all right, if we get rid of Connor Brown in favor of someone cheaper, if we trade, Garrett Sparks, they can kind of find a way to do it through smaller pieces. But it's interesting. There's enough out there right now that you can't say that trading Mitch Marner's not happening.
Yeah. Well, that's they can't go into this. We just talked to Chris Johnson in the 1 o'clock hour of the show, is that it's not a William Nylander situation where you can, well, there's a new deadline. It's December 1st. Like, this is the cap crunch of this season means that you can't have an inflated number for this upcoming year. So that's like, if Mitch Marner does want to, even if he doesn't get an offer sheet, right, like you're still kind of screwed.
Yeah, by the way, can you imagine the backlash if they have William Nylander on the team and not Mitch Marner after this contract season, this couple of years of contract debates? Like, how you right now look angry at the thought of that.
I actually think that looking back on it, especially now, that it's really, I'm of two minds. One is I'm frustrated because part of me just wants to say, dude, they're offering you $10 million a season, maybe even more than that. And you're going to have, one, you're getting paid in American money, which means that you're going to be able to spend it in Canada. So that's worth something. Like, it's not a tax haven, but that is not worthless. Like, this isn't as though you're playing in Buffalo under the same circumstances.
But it's like, not just about the dollars and what you can buy. It's like where you are relative to your peers.
But that's what I'm saying.
Austin Matthews making 11.6.
But this is why I'm frustrated by it, is that to me, it's like you're still getting generational cash. You still have advantages here where the Leafs are going to be able to pay you up front like they've done with other players. You're going to have American money in a Canadian city. You're going to be able to make advertising dollars that are outside of the Leafs. And yes, maybe I think that gets inflated to a certain degree, exactly how much that is at times. But also, yeah, man, you don't have an Apple commercial right now with your face plastered everywhere if you're playing for the Buffalo Sabres. Like, sorry, where's Jack Eichel's ads? I've never seen Jack Eichel in anything. And it's just to ignore all of these things in terms of being able to get yourself up to where your comps are, especially when historically he's looking for a deal that is completely unprecedented. And now moving into RFA and having his approach this way, it's really hard to reconcile this as anything other than, well, I'm just as good as Austin Matthews, and so I want the exact same, or else I am going to sit out or ask to be moved. And that to me is like lame.
To me, though, it's bad advice. I actually don't think that Mitch Marner thinks that or says that. I think that there's people telling him, your whole life you've been undersold. Your whole life you've been undervalued. You're worth more. Look at these comps. Look what you're 22, 94 points. I think there's people in his ear going, you got to get every nickel you can, where I think it's not paying attention to the fact that if this just goes away, if he goes 6 years, $10 million, I'm a free agent again when I'm 28 years old, which means someone's going to give me another 6-year deal. Mm-hmm. And also the headache is gone. The relationships are good. The fans still love me. Here we go. This was never a headache at all. Let's just play hockey. I don't think anyone's appreciating the value in that, how far that would go, as opposed to grinding the team down to the last cent and then the team going, well, we'd like Connor Brown at 2-1, but we could get someone worse for 1-6 because Mitch needed that extra 0.5. Right. I think there's a ton of value in them just going, you know what, let's just do this.
I think, the scenario you painted, it seems obvious on both sides, but yeah, it's clearly...
What I mean. The damage that you're going to potentially do to your public image, and to, I think, your image around the league. Like, how much is it? How much is that worth?
If he signs...
No more Apple, just Huawei phones from now on.
Yeah, but this is all business, right? Like, of course, any negotiation at this point was going to be ill-received by the fans. And when he signs, he'll be received with open arms by the fan base. To me, I don't have a problem with someone trying to get whatever they want. And if it means, okay, at a certain point, there's going to be a decision where, like, is it more important, the money, to get paid 11 plus, or is it more important to play for the Toronto Maple Leafs? That decision is coming. And I think part of the decision will be answered on July 1st, when he goes out into the market, tries to get an offer sheet, and nobody's willing to pony up that dough. At that point, I could see the wheels turning and saying, all right, well, I explored this option. I perhaps thought it would be better leverage than it was. It's not. Let's go back to the negotiating table. And maybe at that point, if you're Kyle Dubas, you're like, you know what? It's not 10 anymore. It's 9-5.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be an awkward situation, but I understand going to the situation, just seeing what's out there, but I just can't foresee a scenario where a team's like, we want to give him 11 times 6 years plus 4 picks.
No, but if you're a team, I think that with him meeting with these groups, clearly there's interest, right? They're not just going to show up and say, hey, we'd love to. But just the idea of them getting his head and saying, listen, we'd love to give you that contract. We just can't do it for the 4 first-round picks. So we're going to have to work with the team to get something, a smaller deal done. But this is what we're willing to move off of to get you. Like, we believe in you. We're going to hand you that money. We got no problems with it.
You're talking about a trade.
Yeah. Well,
why would you acquiesce, though, if you're Dubas? Like, why would you say?
Well, because if Marner decides he has the leverage here in deciding to drag his feet, he goes into the season, he's not playing this year. Like, it's done. If he goes into October, like, I don't know how that's an option for a team that's already this close to the cap, especially when ultimately one of the biggest bothers in this, if you're the Leafs, is that you do have other things to figure out. Like, I know that they've got these deals done in principle with Kapanen and Johnson, and I think that's a nice piece of business because those guys, I've said it a million times, if there was anyone that was going to get offer sheeted or who I thought had a reasonable chance at an offer sheet and it made smart business for the other team, it was those two guys.
Man, $4 million for a few years? No problem.
So them taking under 3.5 is a pretty good indicator that they are the ones who want to be here. Dubas squeezed the right guys.
So does this not leave you with a bad taste about Marner right now?
Yes, and this is what I'm saying, is that you can separate certain things here. I know that everyone wants to turn it into a bait of either you're yelling at Marner and saying, this is you're selfish and you're wrong and you're blowing it, or the Leafs are trying to pinch him and they're being unfair and they're trying to get him on a hometown discount. The frustrating part to me is that none of this seems to be true, that there really is this middle ground, and that the idea of playing in Toronto, other people are going to push it out there as like, oh, you're just Toronto media. But no, man, there's a lot of attractiveness to this. Again, from a winning cycle standpoint, the idea that you get to play on a line with John freaking Tavares. You watched your points go up by 25 last year. Like 25 points. Tavares went up by 4, okay? Yeah. Like, you can't discount that impact. Marner had a good season, but you cannot discount the way that John Tavares changed things for him and his ability around the net and adding a bunch of those totals to Mitch Marner. Again, I went over all those different money reasons that you should be a Toronto Maple Leaf. It's just, I don't understand. I'm having difficulty understanding. I shouldn't say I don't understand at all, but how this is getting spun into one or the other. Either he's taking some type of a massive hometown discount and acquiescing to the franchise, versus he's being the most selfish person on the planet and he's a guy that you can't win with.
Who thinks 10 over 8 is a hometown discount?
No, dude, a lot of people do. A lot of people point to, okay, I'm just saying, there have been many people that have pushed out the idea that because of the points totals, having more points and the positionless hockey and the idea that, you need to pay your younger players more. We've talked to Ian Tulloch about this the other day, like in looking at old historical comparisons, is generally it's been 11% of the cap is what you pay for a winger, a high-end winger. Like, that's what you give them. And that he is looking for much higher than that. But that maybe the goalposts are changing based on the way restricted free agents view themselves and the way that the league is shaping. So I think there's a case for him to get more. I just don't think that it's worth hurting your image and the team's ability to try to build a winner this offseason for that, when we're probably going to be discussing at most a few $1 million. And I know that sounds like a lot, but it's something I feel like he can make up in other areas.
I also like how good do you feel about the Austin Matthews contract situation, and not just the dollars and cents, but the way it went down.
Yeah.
Like, it just happened, right?
Yeah.
They're like, we don't need the headache of dragging this out, going to war with Austin Matthews. We need to make them happy. And, a lot of people don't love that contract. I personally think it's fine.
Yeah.
But I wonder if there wasn't a part of Dubas and crew that said there's so much value in just preserving the relationship with fans, with us and the Matthews camp, and we'll just say, yeah, we'd like to give them, 11-1, 11-2, but okay, here's 11-5, or, whatever the exact dollars are. But, I said that earlier in the show, but I do think there's a lot of value there. I'm on your page. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I bet if you're Dubis, you're going, can someone else go first?
Yeah,
can Nico
that's another thing.
sign a deal?
This class is insane.
Yeah, but it seems like he doesn't care about that, which is
why
wild.
Would he not have? Why does it seem like that?
That's because Bob McKenzie tweeted that he doesn't view his comparable as Mikko Rantanen. He views his comparable as Austin Matthews.
Yeah, well, so you don't get to make up your own comparable.
But that's what a negotiation is, though. You can say whatever you want, and then, okay, either that's true or it's not. Either Kyle Dubas says, okay, I guess, like 11-6 for you, or he says, nah, Okay, you're a free agent. Go out there, see if somebody else agrees with your point of view. If not, come back to me. Here's the real number you're getting.
Yeah, you see Marner going to this like talk to other teams, period. You wonder if it's not Dubis and them being like, go see.
Yeah.
Go find out that this
for
doesn't
sure.
exist in this fantasy world.
So let's say he goes and someone decides, yep, we're going to slap him with $11 million. Let's just say it's 11. Like, because again, I think it's 10 over 10.5 is the offer sheet, right?
Mm-hmm.
But apparently, like, the Leafs might even have been willing to give him 11 over 8. But let's say a team goes and offers him
if it went
11 over 6 or something along those lines. What do you
match that?
What do? You just we're all in camp automatic match. Or
I match 11.
I bet they match and trade. I bet you match the contract, then you see if you can
But
get
you
some.
think you could get more than 4 first-round picks?
Well, no, that's a good point.
And let's not forget that how cap space is coveted
here's the
around
issue,
the league
though.
right now.
The 4 first-round picks don't help you today when you're trying to win a cup. So I guess you got to prioritize your window and then make that assessment, or even take the 4 picks and then see what you can turn it into today with a cap space. But certainly they can't just let them go and go, well, now we have money and spend it on no ones.
Well, I think the frustrating point for them would be if that ended up happening and they had those 4 first-round picks, how they would have probably liked to have been in a PK Subban sweepstakes.
No kidding.
How it's like, yep, you know what? We couldn't eat the $9 million before, but we can now, and he would have solved
and we'll
a lot
have
of
two left over for something else.
Yeah, exactly. And you would have solved a lot of problems. Plus, you would have had all of those picks in the cupboard to do something else with it. Like, I think that would be
That's a big thing that kind of goes unsaid, or at least underappreciated in all of this, that you don't get to make the moves as a package. You don't get to know what's coming next. You just kind of got to make your moves as you can make them. And if you could make the moves going, all right, this isn't going to work out with Mitch, so we're going to do this with PK. I actually, just a quick tangent, I met with someone from another organization recently who explained to me that they're in contract negotiations with a player. They're offering him X. That player thinks he's worth more, and he's going to go to the open market. In the meantime, while he's doing that, they may find another player to replace him, and then that player out there may find that there isn't a market higher than what he was originally offered.
the Edwin Encarnacion.
Sign for the same thing you had offered him, essentially, and then teams go, well, why didn't you sign him? We could have signed him for that much. And it doesn't work like all the steps, right?
Yeah. Well, I also wonder that about the Janssen and Kapanen deals that are apparently agreed to in principle. And they're, we'd love to put the pen to paper. We have to wait on Mitch Marner. But that's a little confusing to me. So, like, Mitch Marner signs for more than you anticipated. You're not signing those guys. You're trading one of them. And then once you get past July 1st with those 2 guys, too, then aren't you in the danger zone of, like, hey, I know we've agreed to this thing. Why isn't this signed? Why? What?
No,
we're going to hang up the phone if somebody calls?
Well, I think that the idea here is that those guys are on the roster next year, that they're agreeing to stay. Like, the only reason is they're taking less and not exploring
No,
it.
but I mean, why isn't that official? Like, why are apparently the hang up and actually making it official is that Mitch Marner has to come
Where'd you
first.
see that?
I saw that a couple different times.
Yeah, but you're right, though, that if they don't have pen to paper by July 1st, then this RFA situation we talked about where someone calls and says, yeah, we'll do 4-2 for Janssen. That's fine, and give a second-round pick.
I think, though, that those guys would realize that that's a possibility. It's just that to them, they would rather not have the 4-2 to stay, right?
I think when you're making that dollar amount at that age, that 0.7 we're talking about is huge.
I agree, but that's why I think Dubis has won those negotiations. I think that those things are done in principle, and that what we're waiting for in terms of Marner is just like when Marner signs,
is it
like
going
you
to
tweeted,
affect
that it's going to maybe affect the number? Although, again, I saw another tweet that said that it looks like it's pretty set in stone in terms of what they're both getting in terms of, like, I think it's 3.2 and 3.6 for Janssen.
Janssen getting more than Kapanen. Isn't that interesting? Here, Kapanen.
He's signing for the extra year.
And also, he has arbitration rights.
Yeah.
And Kapanen doesn't.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And also, he's better. Also that.
I don't know if that's a controversial opinion.
Not on this show. But
Yeah, not in this room, but yes, online, it's very, very controversial. People got very upset with
You
me.
guys are terminally online.
Yeah, probably a little bit too much. I don't know. I think that it's just, you're right. You don't get the 4 first-round picks that help you immediately, which is a problem. And then, okay, let's say that you're pivoting and you're using a couple of them to acquire different pieces that fill the rest of your cap space, or that, you're signing somebody else. I just think that players of Mitch Marner's caliber are so rare that the danger of doing that it's too high. His chemistry with John Tavares. You know that when you have that group together, you have one of the best lines in hockey.
I wonder if they wouldn't get some sense that an offer sheet would be coming for Mitch before it actually happens and then trade him somewhere else because F you.
But you're you're implying then that the idea of trading Mitch Marner for someone else, like an actual hockey player, would be better than acquiring the 4 firsts.
Well, I agree with that.
And it depends what team and what players. Obviously, those are real factors. But I definitely think if sitting here, I don't know how we would poll this room, but it's next year. Next year and the year after, to me, that's it.
No, if you don't get out of the first round
Who's
next
the
year, I think,
score?
Mike Babcock's fired, first of all.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's major questions being asked of this core. It's like, what the hell's going on here? We're now, the grace period is definitely over. It might have been over this year, losing in 7 games to the Boston Bruins, despite the fact that you didn't have home ice advantage. Yeah, you lose, who cares, to the team that ends up in the Stanley Cup final in the first round this year. You're big time trouble. So, yeah, no, you can't. While it's a nice return, and who wouldn't like to have 4 first-round picks, especially when you don't have one in back-to-back years, but who cares? Like, honestly, unless you're going to take those picks and package them in some other trade, which...
Well, the idea was always that you would take those 4 firsts and then you would try to sign a guy like Carlson. But guess what? Carlson's off the market.
Yep.
So now you're talking about Panarin. Guess what? Looks like he's going to try to break the bank as well. Like, who knows if he even wants to be here or what the price of that is going to be. And then you explore the trade market. So say you're flipping some of those 4 first-round picks or a bunch of them, like who's got what you need and that they're just willing to go in that direction right now. That's why the PK thing to me was a little frustrating just from the standpoint of he would have been a really nice piece for this team to be able to absorb if they knew that Mitch Marner was absolutely leaving.
That's a big if, yeah.
And that's why when the Leafs were in on that discussion, the question was, okay, the rumor is that the Leafs were looking to take on PK Subban but have the Nashville Predators eat some of the money so that they would take on around $6 million. But guess what the Leafs don't have? $6 million. Like, it's just not there for them. Again, we outlined that if you bring back Mitch at 10, you've got $500,000 to work with. So one is, do you wish the Leafs were able to acquire this player? And 2 is like, what would you have sacrificed to get PK?
Not too much. I think he kind of fits the mold. So first off, I do not want to come off as slagging PK as a player or anything to that effect. I think he's a good player.
Says the man who just said I wouldn't give up too much for him.
I wouldn't.
Can I just interject with one quick thing on that?
Please do.
A lot of people texted me like, this is proof that PK is a bad locker room guy and that you'll give him away for free and it wasn't the cap thing. PK Subban's teams have been in the playoffs 8 of the 10 years he's been in the NHL.
The Cup final like last year.
8 of the 10 years. One of those years was when every player on Montreal except for him was hurt. I just think the idea that somehow he goes into a locker room and it's a grenade and you can't come out of it is just so stupid based on the fact that, once again, 8 of 10 years he's been there. You can argue about him being a declining player, but the idea that he's just such a disaster in the room is hilarious to me at this point.
I think it's possible that he rubs some people the wrong way or something, but yeah.
Who with a personality doesn't rub some people the wrong way?
Absolutely.
I'm very agreeable. I don't know what you're talking about.
But yeah, I just think that, again, we're talking dollars and cents, and to take on PK for $6 million and not $9 million, who knows, there'd be some additional cost in terms of what you're giving up. But I just think that he is exactly, when we sit here and talk about the Leafs, what we complain about. Boy, they have talent, but I'm not sure if they have that grit. I don't know if they're structured enough. I don't know if they play, everything they have. I know you would like to have PK, but you have to weigh that versus the cost. And I don't know what the cost would have been the other way, but the salary cap is their biggest problem. It would have been nice, and I think it's cool that they pursued it. Hey, right shot D with talent, great. But I don't know, man. It would have been awfully tough to make it work given the situation.
The only things that I could put together that would have made sense, again, if we're working in the world where it's $6 million, because the $9 million to me is impossible unless Marner's gone. But would have been if you're trading Jake Muzzin and someone's just basically taking his contract, then you're moving Connor Brown, and there you've created yourself $6 million for him. And you've
Jake Muzzin and Connor Brown?
Yeah, they're not going to Nashville the other way because they need cap space, but you're moving them in separate deals, basically dumping them, making 2 other teams that were interested, and then you're making the space for PK.
I just feel any scenario where we're saying Jake Muzzin is gone for money purposes makes no sense, because that decor is built on, toothpicks right now. It's not lumber, it's not steel, it's toothpicks. So we need him holding up one pillar of the defensive end.
So if he's not gone, then how are you changing this blue line? Because if you're entering the season tomorrow, Travis Dermott's gone for pretty undetermined amount of time. We're looking at January, maybe February to see Travis Dermott again. And then it's a matter of, okay, that's the guy you're counting on potentially to play next to Morgan Riley. You've got a couple of months to get him up to speed to where he's going to be ready to play in the first round against maybe the Lightning or the Bruins again, or an improved Montreal team. Who knows what's there for you, right?
Well,
Go ahead.
Here, so everyone out there can take out their like pixie sticks, and here's my Fantasyland explanation for what I think will happen.
I want to do it realistically. I don't want to do Fantasyland. I'm just saying, as of right now, they have Morgan Riley, Jake Muzzin, Callie Rosen, and they apparently want to still move off of Zaitsev. And CJ said today that they still should be able to do it. So bad contract for bad contract.
Ben is
another
play
blue liner
lefty on the third pair.
Right. It just, and then it's you have 500 grand. You have 500 grand.
Cheap deal.
Yeah. So my Fantasyland version is just being behind the scenes a little bit with the Toronto Maple Leafs. You know how we all know Nate Schmidt is good? Did you know Nate Schmidt was good when he was a seventh defenseman for Washington in the press box when they were in the playoffs and losing games against Toronto? You didn't, did you? No, his name didn't come up. But Kyle Dubis was like, so I think Orpik got hurt or someone. He was so upset because Nate Schmidt was going to go in. And he tried to acquire Nate Schmidt, and it just couldn't happen for whatever reason. He's got these guys that he kind of sees coming a little bit before the rest of us. And Colin Miller's a guy that I think he also thought was high on in.
Been hearing about Colin Miller to the Leafs for 2 years.
Yeah, during the
and the guy also makes
draft,
3.8, I think.
Right. But the point is there are players that you can acquire who don't make a lot of money that you take a chance on. And I don't know who that is. And that's why it's my fairy dust fantasy version.
I love that.
Fairy dust fantasy land.
No, that's even beyond that. That's like saying, well, there's a good player. I think they'll get a good player. They'll just go for the good player pile.
Yeah, well,
I agree with that take.
I just don't believe that we have a semblance, like 10% of the information necessary when they sit around their gigantic room with their board and their players who they're pursuing. I don't think we have a sniff.
I hope that's correct.
You're probably right. And that's, again, though, why it makes the Marner thing more frustrating, because you'd like to know what kind of money you're working with and what your roster looks like.
They just have no information.
That's what I mean. Yeah. You don't know what you're working with until, we could hit free agency here, where the team might actually see a bargain free agent. They say, you know what, we'd like, and this person is willing to take, maybe $2 million, but we don't know if we're going to have that two. We don't know how we're going to have the one.
Mitchie's playing with fire, man.
That's just it. By the way, I have a hot take. I have a Dubis hot take for you, but we'll save it for the other side of the break.
Also, we got to talk about team dad Patrick Marleau being gone. All they had to do is give up a first round pick.
I teased this on the other side of the break about a bit of a Dubis hot take, and let me preface it with, I don't think that this is the thing that would stop a general manager from making a move. That ultimately these guys have to do right by their hockey club. But I was thinking about this at the draft. Maybe, this is why I'm going to get roasted for it, is comparing fantasy leagues to real life where these guys are doing business for that is worth millions of dollars. But in your fantasy league, the guy in your league that's really, really good every single year, and he's constantly winning titles, or she is constantly winning titles, there becomes a hesitancy to do business with that person, because you feel like you're always getting hoodwinked.
James Dolan and Masai Ujiri.
So every time a person does a trade with that person, the rest of the league just rakes them over the coals, because they're like, I can't believe you did business with person X. In our fantasy football league, it's my friend Sean. Anytime you do a trade with Sean, the rest of the league is fired up in the group chat for about a month and a half about how stupid you are for dealing with Sean. And God forbid that deal go backfire on you, because if it does, then it's you had no excuse. You should have known that you should have never done a deal with this person. And I wonder now if, with all of the attention that Kyle Dubis gets as basically the savior of Toronto, the golden child, the golden boy, the wizard, that there is some hesitancy of other organizations to do a deal with the Leafs, because they know, I need it to be a slam dunk. Because if it ever backfires on me that I did a deal with Kyle Dubis and he comes up way ahead in this thing, I'm never going to be able to live it down.
I hate that I 100% agree and have had that exact thought myself.
Bourne coming to the hot take side.
I don't even know that it's that hot of a take. I mean, there is, we talk about Toronto more than any other team, and this media market is covered more than any other team in the NHL. Mm-hmm. So when you do a deal with Toronto, it is going to be magnified. I don't know however many fold you want to say. Right. I don't think it's silly to say tenfold.
But where's the comparison as far as the lopsided trades he's made in the Leafs' favor and the championships they've won?
That's the point. No. That's the point, though, is that you can't be the person that deals with that guy if you are not 100% convinced that you are going to be perceived as this was a slam dunk and there's no question about it.
Yeah, I think it's as much Toronto as it is Dubis.
Yes.
You don't want to be the person who is like, the rest of the league is like, are you serious? Like, we have to hear about Toronto more. You made that deal. So I think teams do pay a little extra attention. Not that teams are lazily making a deal with Carolina, like, here, take this player. But I certainly think it does raise the stakes a little bit. And I wanted to be able to kill you because I really enjoy doing that. But I think there is some truth in that.
I don't buy it.
You don't think that Pierre Dorian, who was talking with Dubis at the draft, thinking about making a deal,
not two guys with yeah, I was going to say this, not two guys with more divergent appearances and conversations about them in the league than those two guys.
Here, would you agree with this? Would you not think that a lot of the old boys club around the NHL, some who are probably more into the I hate saying eye test for analytics, but yes, the more
we do need other words for this.
Yes,
because it's not
people
so
with more
polar.
experience. Just think about this in your own industry, for God's sakes. That sometimes people with experience feel as though their experience is like being discounted, especially in an era where there are a lot of numbers and there is a lot of cachet.
But then shouldn't you feel like then you can take advantage of Kyle Dubis then if that's truly what you believe?
If that's what you want to do.
He's wrong.
I'm saying if you're not able to do it, that you are not trying to do the net neutral deal. That there's probably a little bit of professional jealousy for the way that Dubis is perceived and all of the things that he has as a young age and the platform and the spotlight that he has. You wouldn't agree with that?
I'm sure there's professional jealousy, but I would think that you rising to the ranks of a National Hockey League general manager, that you're competitive dude,
the
and that you
ones
don't
who
want
give $7 million to Kevin Hayes for as long as he's going to play in the NHL. Those general managers, they're so infallible.
No, I'm not
all
saying
the moves.
Did I say they were infallible?
No, I'm just saying that you rise your way up there.
No, that you're competitive and that you wouldn't be terrified of Kyle Dubis. And if you truly did believe in a little more old school than new numbers way, that you'd be like, let's knock this kid down a peg. Let's take advantage. Let's take advantage of this kid's abacus.
Right. But if he doesn't get taken advantage of, then you're not you're opposed to maybe doing some other deals. Like you do try to do the hoodwink, and then that doesn't work, and you're like, okay, well then nothing.
Yeah, I don't know. It's tough to say, how interested they would be, but I would be interested to know if there is some older guy out there like this kid thinks this numbers, is going to give him, the secrets to a Stanley Cup. Well, I'm going to take his tough players, and it would be interesting. I think definitely who he is does play some factor in potential trades.
What I would really be fascinated to know is to give like the truth serum to the other general managers and to see they always do the rankings, like the player pools, where they say, like, who do you think is the dirtiest player? Who do you think is the most overrated? Who do you think is the most underrated? I'd love to see one from the executives about other executives.
You know what I was thinking as you were saying this is I don't think you could ever get them to do it, but it would be crazy if you could get other GMs to rank who you would like to lose a trade to the least.
Yeah.
Like rank from 1 to 31. Who would it burn you the very most? Chayka, the 20.
But that's what I'm saying. How much of a difference do you think there is image-wise between Chayka and Dubis? Like, I know Dubis is more of the, like, he's got the OHL background.
10 years on him, too.
Yeah, man. He's my guess would be that he is a little bit more respected by his peers for his background. But I would still think that, yeah, man, he probably didn't hang out with a lot of those dudes around the league that know each other and have known each other for decades.
Yeah, they're definitely not a part of the old boys club.
Right.
Also, though, I'm fascinated to know who other GMs fear the most. Who's the guy that you're like, you don't call?
Who's the Messiah? Who's the
also,
don't pick up the phone?
I've read this for a couple years. Yeah, I've read this a couple years on Twitter though. But if you identify someone who you think is the worst in the league, don't you just call that guy all the time?
Yeah.
Like, do you think Jim Benning is like, God, my phone won't stop ringing? This
By
job.
the way, that trade over the weekend, I had to read that like 3 times over.
Well, when you're at JT Miller away from a Stanley Cup, you got to pull the trigger.
Yeah. What do you think that negotiation was for Tampa? They're like, we'll give you a third for JT Miller, and they're like, just throw in first though. What do you think about that? And they're like, ha, done.
you fool.
Yeah. And they said, oh well, if we're not in the playoffs this year, it's going to roll over to next year. Tampa's like, cool. So we'll have that pick next year then. Like that.
Yeah. Write that in there.
We're good for next year now. The front runners, the team that's the only group that appears to be interested in Nikita Zaitsev. We'll do the deal with you.
Yeah, it's like, sorry, you got Tyler Myers in for hearings for $7 million a year, and you're looking at Zaitsev. We're good with that.
So, anyways, I'm glad that you don't think that's the hottest take on the planet. By the way, how's this for the hot take? That Kevin Hayes contract I mentioned, doesn't that immediately validate the William Nylander contract? Like, who in their right mind would rather have Kevin Hayes at that number and that term than William Nylander at his number and that term?
Isn't it funny that through all of this, the Nylander's the only name you don't hear where someone's like, well, we can move Willie. Like
because
that's
his contract is good now.
right. How long did that take? 11 minutes.
Yep. But this was always the case for it.
I mean,
I think it was more to do with the fact that this is. I think
I
this
was
is
at,
the one.
by the way, I was at a
Go ahead.
wedding 2 days ago where someone told me that's the worst contract in the NHL. Just a friend who watches sports who was like, they got to get rid of that Nylander contract.
Yeah, but that happens. Like again, I try.
Well, if he is what he is, what he was for the majority of last year, then yeah, it's not a great deal. Like if he is what he was for the first 20 games of that contract, yeah, that's a bad deal.
yeah, and
Right.
that's the point. Is that I believe that William Nylander is closer to the player that we've seen on aggregate than we have over a smaller sample size in the struggle, and that I think that if the Leafs decided to dangle that contract tomorrow, there would be quite a few suitors for it, and that it would be viewed as a very, very desirable commodity around the league.